A single sentence, a desperate plea from a pregnant wife to her husband. But when Kate Campbell arrived at the lavish estate hoping for comfort, she found only humiliation. In front of the jeering, champagne-sipping crowd, he called his friends Raymond. Campbell looked at his trembling, visibly pregnant wife and uttered 6 words that shattered her world. "I have no idea who she is." He chose status over his family, laughter over love. But Raymond and his arrogant friends had no idea who they had just crossed. Because the next morning, in the most important meeting of their lives, the woman they dismissed would be the one deciding their fate. Kate Campbell traced the rim of her chamomile tea mug, the steam warming her face, but doing little to melt the icy knot of anxiety in her stomach. Outside the panoramic window of their penthouse apartment, the city lights of Boston glittered like a carpet of scattered diamonds. It was a view that cost more than the house she'd grown up in, a view that was supposed to signify that she and Raymond had made it. Lately, it just made her feel higher up with a longer way to fall. "You're still up." Raymond's voice, smooth and practiced, emerged from the bedroom. He was adjusting the cuffs of his $1,000 shirt, his reflection sharp and impeccable in the hallway's floor-to-ceiling mirror. At 34, Raymond Campbell was the epitome of success, a senior vice president at Sterling and Vance, one of the city's most prestigious investment firms. He had sandy blonde hair that fell with a kind of calculated casualness, eyes the color of a summer sky, and a smile that could disarm regulators and charm fortunes out of old money matriarchs. I have a bad feeling about this weekend, Jules," Kate said, her voice soft. She was 5 months pregnant, a gentle, burgeoning curve beneath her simple cotton nightgown. Her dark hair, a stark contrast to his sun-kissed look, was tied back, and her face, usually bright and expressive, was shadowed with worry. Raymond sighed, the sound laced with a familiar, patronizing patience. "Amy, we've been over this. It's Marcus Thorne's annual autumn hunt party. Everyone who's anyone will be there. It's not just a party, it's the Berkshire version of the stock exchange floor. I need to be there." "I know that," she said, turning to face him. "It's just, you've been so distant. And with the baby is fine." "You are fine," he said, walking over and placing a perfunctory kiss on her forehead. It felt like a CEO stamping a document, approved. "Everything I do for us, for this family." He gestured vaguely at the opulent apartment at the glittering city beyond. "This doesn't happen by accident. It happens by shaking the right hands, laughing at the right jokes, and being at Marcus Thorne's estate." Kate knew of Marcus Thorne. She'd never met him, as Raymond had a habit of keeping his work friends and his home life in separate, hermetically sealed containers. Marcus was old money, the kind that viewed Raymond's hard-earned success as charmingly novel but ultimately second-tier. Raymond orbited men like Marcus, desperate for their casual inherited validation. "Can't I come with you?" she asked, a final hopeful plea. "I'll stay out of your way. I just don't want to be alone all weekend." Raymond's face tightened, almost imperceptibly. "It's a boys' weekend, Amy. Stag hunt poker cigars. You'd be bored to tears, and honestly." He paused, choosing his words. It would change the dynamic. "They see me as this shark, this killer in the boardroom. A pregnant wife, it softens the image. The words meant to sound like a strategic calculation, landed like 1,000 tiny cuts. Softens the image, as if their child, their future, was a branding liability. Okay, she whispered, turning back to the window. Okay, Raymond. Go, have fun. He gave her shoulder a squeeze. That's my girl. I'll call you tomorrow. Don't wait up. She listened to the door click shut. The silence of the penthouse suddenly deafening. The knot of anxiety in her stomach coiled tighter, morphing into a cold, hard dread. She picked up her phone and looked at the ultrasound picture she'd set as her wallpaper, a grainy black and white promise of a life to come. He does love us, she told herself. A mantra that was sounding thinner and more desperate each time she repeated it. He's just under a lot of pressure. The next evening, the dread hadn't subsided. It had grown fed by a day of silence. No call, no text, just the single sterile read receipt on the message she'd sent him that morning. Around 7 p.m., a sharp, cramping pain seized her abdomen. It was sudden and fierce, stealing her breath. Panic, cold and electric, shot through her. She waited, breathing through it, praying it was just a Braxton Hicks contraction, something the books described as normal. But then another one came harder this time. She called her obstetrician's on-call number. The doctor was calm, reassuring. It was likely nothing, she said, but given it was her first pregnancy, she should try to relax. Stress could be a major factor. If the pains got closer together, or were accompanied by any spotting, she should come into the hospital immediately. Is your husband there? The doctor asked. No, he's out of town, Kate replied, the words tasting like ash. Well, try to put your feet up, drink some water, and have a friend or family member come stay with you just in case. Kate hung up, feeling the full, crushing weight of her isolation. Her family was in Ohio, 1,000 miles away. Her friends in Boston were from her old life, the one before Raymond, and she'd let those connections wither, caught up in his dazzling, demanding world. There was no one to call. The doctor's words echoed in her mind. Stress could be a major factor. All she could think about was Raymond at a party laughing and networking while she was here alone and terrified. The thought fueled a desperate resolve. She couldn't just sit here. She needed him. She needed her husband. She knew the estate was somewhere in the Berkshires, a 2-hour drive away. She remembered Raymond mentioning the town name, once Lenox. A quick search for Marcus Thorne Estate. Lenox brought up a slew of society pages and Architectural Digest articles. The Thorne family's autumn cottage was a place called Blackwood Manor, an infamous Gilded Age monstrosity of granite and slate. Without a second thought, she threw on a simple maternity dress, grabbed her purse and keys, and left the silent penthouse. The drive was a blur of highway lights and the thrumming of her own heartbeat. The cramping subsided into a dull, persistent ache, but the fear remained. Each mile that passed, she rehearsed what she would say. She wouldn't be angry. She'd just be relieved. She'd pull him aside quietly and tell him she'd had a scare, that she just needed to be with him. He would understand. He had to. Arriving at Blackwood Manor was like driving onto a movie set. A long, winding driveway was lined with flaming torches illuminating ancient oak trees. Valets in crisp uniforms were parking an endless stream of Porsches, Bentleys, and Teslas. Music and laughter spilled from the brilliantly lit mansion, a sprawling castle of dark stone and diamond-paned windows. She felt a tremor of self-consciousness. She was in a simple cotton dress. Her hair hastily brushed her face, pale with worry. She looked nothing like the women she saw stepping out of the luxury cars, draped in cashmere and dripping with jewels. She gave her modest sedan to a valet who looked at it with thinly veiled disdain and walked towards the colossal front doors. The noise and heat hit her like a physical blow. The air was thick with the smell of expensive cologne wood smoke from a massive fireplace and whiskey. The great hall was thronged with men in tweed and tailored jackets and women in chic, understatedly expensive attire. In the center of it all, holding court by the fireplace, was Raymond. He was laughing, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He was surrounded by a group of men, including a handsome, hawk-nosed man she assumed was their host, Marcus Thorne. A stunning woman with sharp, predatory features and a crimson dress, Chloe Vance was hanging on Raymond's arm. Her laughter a little too loud, her hand a little too high on his bicep. Kate's heart, which had been pounding with fear, now began to thud with a different, more painful emotion. She took a hesitant step forward, trying to catch his eye. "Raymond," she called out, her voice barely a whisper. He didn't hear her. She took another step, moving into the light. "Raymond." This time his head turned. His eyes met hers. For a split second, she saw a flicker of genuine shock of recognition. But it was instantly extinguished, replaced by a cold blank slate. His smile didn't falter, but it became a mask. Marcus Thorne noticed Raymond's gaze and followed it to Kate. He looked her up and down from her simple dress to her visible baby bump, a sneer playing on his lips. "Raymond, my boy." Marcus drawled, his voice carrying across the sudden lull in their conversation. "You have an admirer. Do you know this woman?" The world seemed to slow down. The crackling of the fire, the murmur of the party, the clinking of glasses. It all faded into a dull roar. Kate stood frozen, her hand instinctively going to her belly. She watched her husband's face, pleading with her eyes for him to do the right thing. To say, "Yes, this is my wife, Kate. Excuse us for a moment." Raymond looked from Kate's desperate face to Marcus's mocking one, and then to the circle of expectant, judgmental faces around him. He saw Chloe Vance's perfectly arched eyebrow challenging him. He saw the cumulative weight of their status, their power, their acceptance. And he made a choice. He gave a short, dismissive laugh. He turned his body slightly away from her, a gesture of pure, absolute rejection. Looking directly at Marcus, but speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear, he said the 6 words that would echo in the chambers of Kate's heart forever. "I have no idea who she is." A wave of snickering went through the group. Chloe tightened her grip on Raymond's arm, a triumphant smirk on her face. "Probably just some local girl who heard there was a party," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "Maybe she's looking for a rich baby daddy. You ought to be more careful, Raymond." Raymond played along, a pained but amused expression on his face. The perils of being so charming, he joked weakly. Kate felt the floor drop out from under her. The air was punched from her lungs. It wasn't just the denial. It was the casual cruelty, the laughter. He hadn't just denied her. He had offered her up for sport. She was a ghost in front of the man she loved, a stranger to the father of her child. The physical pain in her abdomen was nothing compared to the agony that ripped through her soul. Her vision swam. She saw Raymond turn his back on her, completely raising his glass to his friends. She saw Marcus Thorne give a security guard a subtle nod in her direction. Shame, hot and suffocating, washed over her. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. With a strength she didn't know she possessed, she pulled her shoulders back. She met the smug gaze of Chloe Vance for a brief, searing moment. Then she turned without another word and walked away. She moved with a strange, dreamlike calm, past the jeering faces through the colossal doors and back into the cold night air. The valet, seeing her pale face and tear-filled eyes, retrieved her car with uncharacteristic speed and silence. She didn't cry on the drive back to Boston. The pain was too deep for tears. It was a cold, hard, crystallizing fury. The man she had loved, the man for whom she had sacrificed her own ambitions and friendships and friendships, had disowned her and their unborn child for the price of a laugh from a room full of shallow, cruel people. As she drove, the shock began to recede, replaced by a chilling clarity. The cramping in her belly had stopped, as if her body understood that it needed to be strong now. She was no longer just Kate Campbell, the supportive wife. That woman had died in the great hall of Blackwood Manor. When she finally walked back into the silent, glittering penthouse, it no longer felt like home. It felt like a core he had built for her. And she knew with absolute certainty that she was done being the songbird. It was time to show him her claws. She sat down not at the kitchen table, but at the sleek glass desk in the study, Raymond's desk. She opened her laptop, the screen illuminating her face, now set like stone. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, not searching for baby names or parenting blogs, but opening secure files, firing off encrypted emails, and making a single critical phone call. "David," she said, when a calm voice answered. "It's me. We're moving up the timeline. Full execution. Now." Raymond Campbell woke up with a pounding headache and the sour taste of expensive whiskey in his mouth. Sunlight streamed through the guest room window at Blackwood Manor, mocking his throbbing temples. Fragments of the previous night came back to him in disjointed flashes. The roaring fire, the endless flow of Macallan, 25. Marcus Thorne, clapping him on the back. Chloe Vance's fingers tracing patterns on his arm. And then the memory that made his stomach clench Kate. He winced, rolling over. The image of her face, the shock, the hurt, the betrayal was seared into his brain. A wave of something that felt like guilt, but was quickly suppressed by self-preservation, washed over him. What else could he have done? Acknowledging her would have been social suicide. He would have become a laughingstock. Marcus and his circle were brutal. They preyed on weakness, and showing up with a frantic, pregnant wife was the very definition of weakness in their world. "I'll fix it," he told himself, the way he always did. He'd go home, buy her some extravagant piece of jewelry, tell her he was drunk and panicked that he was protecting his career for them. She'd be angry, she'd cry, but she'd forgive him. She always did. Kate was gentle, understanding. That was one of the things he'd loved about her. She was his soft place to land. He checked his phone. Nothing from her. No angry texts, no missed calls. A flicker of unease went through him. That was unusual. Silence from Kate was worse than shouting. Still, he brushed it off. He had bigger things to worry about today. Monday. The big day. The entire senior leadership of Sterling and Vance had been on edge for weeks. The firm was in trouble. A series of aggressive, high-risk investments, many spearheaded by his own department, had soured dramatically. A rival firm, a mysterious and ruthlessly efficient entity known only as the Phoenix Group, had been buying up their debt and was now poised for what looked like a hostile takeover. Today, there was an emergency all-hands board meeting. The firm's founder and CEO, the formidable Arthur Sterling, had called it. The rumor was that they were going to meet the principal of the Phoenix Group for the first time. Raymond showered, put on his best suit, his armor, and drove back to Boston, a knot of professional anxiety replacing his marital guilt. He needed to be sharp to position himself as indispensable a key player in whatever new regime was coming. His entire identity, his penthouse, his seat at tables like Marcus Thorne's, it all depended on his position at Sterling and Vance. He walked into the headquarters, a skyscraper of steel and smoked glass in the heart of the financial district, with his game face on. He nodded confidently at colleagues, his demeanor betraying none of his hangover or his domestic turmoil. He strode into the 40th floor boardroom, a magnificent space with a mahogany table the size of a small boat and a wall of windows offering a godlike view of the city. The mood was funereal. Arthur Sterling, a man in his late 60s with a face like a carved eagle, stood at the head of the table. The other partners and VPs were scattered around, their faces grim. Raymond took his usual seat, feeling a thrill of importance despite the dire circumstances. "Thank you for coming." Sterling began, his voice gravelly. "As you know, the firm is facing an unprecedented challenge. The Phoenix Group has us cornered. They have the votes, they have the capital, and they have acquired a controlling interest in our debt. In short, the wolf is no longer at the door. It is in the house." A nervous murmur went through the room. For weeks, they have operated through lawyers and shell corporations, a complete enigma. We knew them only by their reputation, brilliant, aggressive, and utterly invisible. Their leader has been a ghost. Until now. Sterling paused, letting the tension build. "The principal of the Phoenix Group has agreed to meet with us today to lay out their terms. They are on their way up now." Raymond straightened his tie, his mind racing. Who could it be? A corporate raider from New York, a sovereign wealth fund from the Middle East. He prepared himself to be deferential, impressive to survive the culling that was sure to come. The heavy oak doors of the boardroom swung open. Every head turned, Raymond's included, and the world stopped turning on its axis. Standing in the doorway was Kate. But it was not the Kate he knew. It wasn't the soft, gentle woman who drank chamomile tea and worried about him. This woman was a stranger. She wore a bespoke charcoal grey power suit that fit her perfectly, accentuating her pregnancy not as a vulnerability, but as an undeniable fact of her presence. Her hair was pulled back into a severe, elegant chignon. Her face, free of makeup, save for a slash of bold red lipstick, was calm, confident, and utterly unreadable. The only hint of the woman from the party was the cold, hard fury that now glittered in her eyes like black diamonds. She was flanked by two men in dark suits, one of whom Raymond vaguely recognized as David Chen, a famously sharp corporate lawyer. A wave of confused silence washed over the boardroom. One of the older partners, confused, muttered, "Can we help you, miss?" Kate's eyes scanned the room, passing over the stunned faces of the partners before landing on Raymond. She held his gaze for a single, chilling moment. His blood ran cold. His mouth went dry. This couldn't be real. It was a stress-induced hallucination. A nightmare. Arthur Sterling, who had clearly been expecting her, stepped forward. His voice was filled with a respect Raymond had never heard before. "Gentlemen," Sterling announced, his voice booming in the silent room, "allow me to introduce the principal and managing partner of the Phoenix Group." Kate stepped forward, her heels clicking with quiet authority on the marble floor. She walked to the front of the room, to the large digital screen on the wall that had until a moment ago been showing the Sterling and Vance corporate logo. She tapped a key on a tablet held by her associate. The S&V logo vanished, replaced by the Phoenix Group's emblem, a stylized bird rising from flames. Beneath it, a name and a title appeared in stark white letters, and below that, a professional headshot. A photo of Kate's face, strong and confident, now covered the boardroom wall. Kate Rose Vance, Principal. The Phoenix Group. The name hit Raymond like a physical blow. Vance, as in Sterling and Vance, as in Chloe Vance, Marcus Thorne's catty friend. He'd always thought it was a coincidence. He knew Kate's maiden name was Vance, but she'd always been cagey about her family, saying they were estranged and modest people from out of state. He'd assumed they were nobodies, a detail from a past she, and by extension, he was better off leaving behind. He never once connected it to the Vance of Sterling and Vance, the brilliant but reclusive co-founder who had supposedly cashed out and vanished decades ago. A horrified gasp came from one of the senior partners. Vance, as in Edward Vance? Girl. Kate gave a cool, almost imperceptible nod. Edward was my grandfather, she said, her voice even and clear, resonating with an authority that pinned every man in the room to his seat. He was displeased with the direction the firm took after his departure. He left his shares and his seed capital in a blind trust for me. I've spent the last 10 years growing it. Her eyes swept the room again, a predator surveying its territory. My firm, the Phoenix Group, is now the majority shareholder and primary creditor of Sterling and Vance, which means, as of this morning, you all work for me. The silence that followed was absolute, shattered only by the sound of Raymond Campbell's world collapsing around him. He stared at the giant image of his wife's face on the wall, the wife he had publicly denied and humiliated less than 48 hours ago. The woman he had called a liability, a softening of his image. He was not looking at his wife. He was looking at the wolf. And she was smiling. The boardroom, once a bastion of male bravado and financial power, had transformed into a courtroom, and Kate was the judge, jury, and executioner. The men who had ruled this firm for decades, men who had always viewed Raymond as a rising star, now looked at him with a mixture of confusion and dawning contempt. They were connecting the dots, and the picture they formed was one of Raymond as a fool of monumental proportions. Kate, or rather Miss Vance, as her associate David Chen had pointedly called her, began to speak. She didn't yell. She didn't recriminate. She did something far more terrifying. She wielded facts like a surgeon's scalpel. For the past 18 months, she began pacing slowly before the digital screen, which now displayed a dizzying array of charts and spreadsheets. Sterling and Vance has been operating on a foundation of untenable risk. The Latin American Commodities Fund, for example. She paused, and her eyes, cold and precise, found Raymond. Mr. Campbell, she said, her tone utterly devoid of any personal history. It was the voice of a superior addressing a deeply disappointing subordinate. Your department's quarterly reports projected a 12% growth. Optimistic, given the political instability in the region, a factor your risk assessments conveniently downplayed. The Phoenix Group's analysis projected a 4% loss. The actual result, as of last week, was a catastrophic 9% loss, which has triggered covenants on over $200 million of our debt. Raymond felt the blood drain from his face. He wanted to speak to defend himself, but his tongue felt thick and useless. He looked around the table for support, but his colleagues, men he'd had drinks with and shared locker-room jokes with, avoided his gaze. They were all trying to distance themselves from the radioactive contamination of his failure. Kate continued her dissection of the firm's finances, both brutal and brilliant. She moved from department to department, exposing inflated projections, lazy due diligence, and a culture of cronyism that prioritized bonuses over stability. She knew everything. It was clear she hadn't just bought the company. She had studied it, understood its every weakness, every secret. She had been watching them for years. The culture here, she said, her gaze sweeping across the stunned faces, has become one of image over substance, of chasing short-term highs at the expense of long-term health. This firm was built on a reputation of trust and prudence by my grandfather and Mr. Sterling. That reputation has been squandered. Finally, she turned her attention back to the silent, ashen-faced Raymond. Which brings me to personnel. There will be a full-scale audit of every department. Redundancies will be identified. Inefficiencies will be eliminated. Her eyes locked with his. There was no flicker of the woman he had married, only the glacial power of the woman he had scorned. We will start with the departments that have demonstrated the most creative accounting. Campbell, please have your team prepare all of their files and correspondence for my review. My forensic accountants will be on site this afternoon. You will cooperate fully. It was a public execution. She wasn't firing him. Not yet. She was dismantling him piece by piece in front of the very people whose respect he had killed his family for. He was no longer Raymond Campbell, the Golden Boy SVP. He was Mr. Campbell, the person of interest in a corporate investigation led by his own wife. That is all for now, Kate concluded, turning to Arthur Sterling. Mr. Sterling, you and I will confer in your office. The rest of you back to work. I expect you to conduct yourselves with the utmost professionalism during this transition. With that, she turned and walked out of the boardroom, her team trailing in her wake like a royal retinue. The spell was broken. The room erupted in a cacophony of panicked whispers and accusations. But no one spoke to Raymond. He was suddenly invisible, a ghost in his own professional life, just as he had made Kate a ghost at the party. He sat paralyzed, staring at the empty doorway she had disappeared through. It took him 10 minutes to regain control of his limbs. He stood up on shaky legs and walked out of the boardroom, his ears burning with the shame of it all. As he walked through the open-plan office, he could feel the eyes on him. The news was already spreading like wildfire. Secretaries were whispering behind their hands. Junior analysts were staring openly. He was a dead man walking. He had to talk to her. He had to get to her before she left the building. He didn't even know what he would say. Sorry. It felt like using a paper cup to bail out the Titanic. He took the executive elevator up to the CEO's suite, his heart hammering against his ribs. He found her just as she was leaving Arthur Sterling's office. David Chen was at her side holding a folder. Kate! He croaked, his voice raw. She stopped and turned to him. Her face was a mask of professional neutrality. Mr. Campbell, she corrected him coldly. Do you have something to report regarding the preparation of your files? Kate, please, he begged, taking a step closer. David Chen subtly moved between them, a silent, impassive bodyguard. We need to talk. What you did in there, how could you? And your name? Vance. Why did you never tell me? A flicker of something dark and painful crossed her features before being suppressed. Tell you what, Raymond? That my grandfather was a brilliant man who was heartbroken by what his firm became, that I spent my entire adult life building a company on his principles of merit and integrity, not on backslapping and old boys' clubs. Why would I share that with you? You were so enamored with the world of Marcus Thorne, so desperate to be one of them. You would have tried to use my legacy as your own personal social currency. You would have cheapened it, just as you cheapened me. No, he stammered. No, I love you. Kate let out a short, bitter laugh that held no humor. Love. You don't know the first thing about love. Love is not abandoning your pregnant wife when she's terrified and in pain. Love is not denying her existence to impress a group of shallow bullies. Love is not choosing a fleeting moment of status over a lifetime of family. She took a step forward, forcing David Chen to move aside. She lowered her voice, a venomous whisper, meant only for him. You looked at me on Saturday night, scared and alone, and carrying your child, and you decided I was worthless. So I am going to show you and this entire city exactly what I am worth. You wanted an imager shark, a killer. Be careful what you wish for, Raymond. You just might get it. The baby. He managed to say his last, desperate gambit. What about our baby? Her hand went to her belly, the first gesture of softness he had seen all day. But her eyes remained hard as flint. This is my baby, she said, with chilling finality. I will be its mother, and if necessary, its father. I will give this child a legacy of strength and self-respect. You will have no part in that. You have forfeited your rights. She started to walk away. Kate, wait, he called out, his voice cracking with desperation. I'm sorry. I am so sorry. She stopped at the elevator bank, but didn't turn around. I know you are, Raymond, she said, her back still to him. You're not sorry you did it. You're just sorry you got caught. The elevator doors opened. She stepped inside without a backward glance. The doors slid shut, leaving Raymond standing alone in the hallway, the reflection of a broken man staring back at him from the polished brass. He had lost everything: his career, his reputation, and the woman who was not only his wife, but he now realized with sickening certainty the most formidable person he had ever known. And the nightmare was only just beginning. The silence that followed Kate's ascension was not empty. It was a heavy, suffocating element, thick with unspoken judgment, and the static of 1,000 frantic messages crisscrossing the city's financial networks. For Raymond, the penthouse, once a symbol of his arrival, became a sound-proofed chamber of torment. The panoramic view of Boston was no longer a conquest. It was a constant, glittering reminder of the world that had cast him out. His days bled into one another in a haze of sleeplessness and dread. He'd wake up not to the gentle Boston dawn, but to the jolt of his own heart pounding with a primal fear. He'd reach for his phone, a masochistic ritual to scroll through the news. The stories were relentless, each one a fresh nail in his professional coffin. Vance heiress seizes ancestral firm in shock takeover, read the Financial Times. The ghost of Vance returns to clean house, declared a Forbes online piece. They lauded Kate's brilliance, her strategic genius, her quiet decade-long crusade to reclaim her grandfather's legacy. She was the phoenix. He was the ash. The most galling part was their praise for her methods. They called her team's audit a surgical strike. Her forensic accountants, a quiet, unassuming team from a boutique firm descended on Sterling and Vance, not with bluster, but with an unnerving politeness. They didn't confiscate servers. They mirrored them. They didn't interrogate staff. They held brief, courteous interviews, their questions so precise they felt like pre-written accusations. Raymond learned through a terrified junior analyst who still dared to speak to him that they had uncovered everything. The inflated projections on the Latin American Commodities Fund were not just presented as bad calls, but as a pattern. They found emails where Raymond had explicitly told his team to find a rosier narrative to present to the risk committee. They unearthed his expense reports, a chronicle of his desperation for social acceptance. Dinners at Ma'u, where he'd entertained Marcus Thorne, and his circle were logged as Client Development Thorne Industries. The accountants had cross-referenced these dates with Marcus's social media finding pictures of the group, laughing with captions like, "Another wild Tuesday with the boys." It wasn't just mismanagement. It was a narrative of deceit, a portrait of a man who used company funds to build a fantasy life. He tried to function. He'd sit at his glass desk, the one Kate had used to launch her coup, and stare at market data. But the numbers swam before his eyes. They were a language he no longer spoke. His entire career had been built on a specific type of confidence, a belief in his own ability to shape reality through charm and aggressive optimism. Kate had shattered that reality with something cold, hard, and undeniable: the truth. His social excommunication was absolute. He was a digital leper. Emails to former colleagues bounced back with automated out-of-office replies, a coward's block. He sent a pleading text to Chloe Vance, the woman who had smirked so triumphantly on his arm that fateful night. "Chloe, I know this is a mess, but your family is involved. We should talk." The reply was instant and cutting. "My family is the Vance family. You are a Campbell. I think you'll find there's a significant difference. Do not contact me again." He was an infection they were all desperate to prove they were immune to. One evening, after 3 days of hearing nothing but the hum of the refrigerator and the pounding in his own skull, the chime of the elevator echoed through the apartment. He felt a surge of adrenaline. Was it her? Had she come to deliver the final blow in person? He opened the door to find Marcus Thorne. The man's usual air of languid aristocratic arrogance was gone, replaced by a pallid, wired tension. His eyes, usually filled with detached amusement, were sharp with panic. Marcus Raymond breathed a pathetic flicker of hope igniting. Maybe this was an olive branch, a sign that his exile wasn't permanent. "Thank God. I've been calling you." "Don't." Marcus snapped, his voice tight as a guitar string. He didn't wait for an invitation, pushing past Raymond and striding into the center of the living room. He scanned the opulent space with a look of disgust, as if seeing for the first time how derivative it all was. "Don't you dare act like we're friends. Friendship implies a certain level of mutual respect. I have none left for you." The hope in Raymond's chest died, replaced by a cold dread. "What are you talking about? After all the what?" Raymond Marcus spun on him, his composure cracking, revealing the raw fury beneath. "After all the times I let you into my world, the world you mimicked and aped so desperately. Do you have any idea what you've done?" He began to pace, his movements jerky and agitated. "My family's holding company." Thorne Industries was one of the original investors in this city's financial bedrock. Our position in Sterling and Vance wasn't just a line item on a balance sheet. It was a legacy holding, a symbol of our family's history in Boston. Since your wife took over, the stock has stabilized, but only after a 30% haircut. 30% wiped out because the firm's guts were rotten. And who do they now see as the poster boy for that rot? I didn't know who she was. Raymond pleaded, his voice thin. "I swear to you, Marcus, and that's the entire pathetic point." Marcus roared, stopping his pacing to jab a finger at Raymond. "It's worse that you didn't know. You stood in my home, a home that has hosted Kennedys and Cabots, and you publicly disowned your pregnant wife to get a laugh out of me. You treated her like dirt because you assumed she was dirt. You have no judgment, Raymond. None. And now the world knows that I, Marcus Thorne, associate with men who have no judgment. Men who are cruel to women for sport. He let out a bitter, humorless laugh. Do you understand? This isn't about your loyalty to me. It's about the fact that your staggering stupidity has now become a stain on my reputation. My father called me from Geneva this morning. He wasn't just angry about the money. He was apoplectic about the optics. The company you keep, he said, it reflects on us all. The ultimate irony washed over Raymond with the force of a tidal wave. Marcus wasn't angry about the moral failure. He was furious about the strategic one. Raymond had bet on the wrong horse in the most spectacular fashion imaginable, and it had made Marcus look like a bad gambler. She's not just cleaning house, you idiot, Marcus continued, his voice dropping to a venomous hiss. She's performing a public exorcism. She's going after anyone and everyone tied to the old culture of backroom deals and clubby handshakes. Her auditors flagged a land deal my father made with Sterling 20 years ago. It was perfectly legal, but it was informal. Now it's under a microscope. You didn't just invite the wolf into the henhouse. You handed it the keys and a map to everyone's nests. You are radioactive, Raymond, and I am here to tell you that your contamination ends now. Marcus walked to the door, his posture regaining its aristocratic stiffness. He paused with his hand on the handle and looked back at Raymond, his eyes as cold and unforgiving as a winter sea. I came here as a courtesy to inform you that any association between us is officially over. If reporters ask, I will tell them the truth. You were a junior executive at a bank we occasionally used. A passing acquaintance. A nobody. Our connection was as superficial and meaningless as you are. He opened the door and left. The heavy silence rushed back in to fill the void more oppressive than before. The last bridge hadn't just been burned, it had been dynamited, its foundations obliterated. He was an island, and the tide was rising. A week passed in that silent purgatory. Then an email arrived. It was from an unfamiliar address with a simple subject line, meeting. The body of the message contained only an address, a date, and a time. It was for a private room at a discreet restaurant in Beacon Hill, a place known for its old-world charm and soundproof walls, a place where deals were made and secrets were kept. Raymond dressed for the meeting like a man dressing for his own execution. He chose a subdued grey suit, a far cry from the confident blues and pinstripes he used to favor. When he arrived, she was already there, sitting at a corner table, overlooking a quiet, tree-lined street. The afternoon light caught the curve of her cheek, and for a moment she looked like the Kate he'd fallen in love with. But then she turned, and her eyes held the cool, distant authority he'd come to fear. She was more beautiful than ever, glowing with health and power. Her pregnancy was no longer a gentle curve, but a proud, prominent declaration of the new life she commanded. "Hello, Raymond," she said. Her voice was calm without malice. It was worse than anger. It was indifference. "Kate," he replied, his own voice sounding foreign and weak. He sat the chair, scraping loudly in the quiet room. "Why am I here?" "The audit is complete," she stated simply, placing a slim, unmarked folder on the white tablecloth between them. "And because, despite my better judgment, I am offering you a choice." It's a courtesy you did not afford me on the night I came to you for help." His eyes were fixed on the folder. It felt like a bomb. "What is it?" "It contains 2 possible futures for you." She explained, her tone as measured as if she were discussing a business proposal. "The first is the full report from my forensic accounting team. It details a consistent pattern of professional misconduct, falsification of internal documents, and clear grounds for an SEC investigation into securities fraud. It's more than enough to have you barred from the financial industry for life. With a motivated prosecutor, you would almost certainly face criminal charges. Your name, your picture, everything you built would become synonymous with disgrace." Raymond felt the blood drain from his face. He could see it all: the headlines, the trial, the utter annihilation of his identity. "That is one path," she continued, her gaze unwavering. She slowly slid a single piece of paper from the folder and placed it on top. "The other is this: a letter of resignation effective immediately. It cites vague personal reasons and contains a standard but ironclad non-disclosure agreement. If you sign it, you will walk away from Sterling and Vance. You will receive no severance, no golden parachute. You will simply disappear from this world. In return, the audit's findings will be permanently sealed. I will not pursue any legal or civil action. You will be free to leave Boston and attempt to build a new life however you see fit." He stared at the single sheet of paper. It was an escape hatch from a crashing plane. A pardon. An act of mercy so profound and undeserved it took his breath away. "Why?" He whispered the question tearing from his throat. "After everything I did to you, to us, why would you give me a way out?" Kate was quiet for a long time, her gaze shifting to the window, watching a leaf spiral down to the cobblestone street. When she looked back at him, the corporate armor in her eyes seemed to crack, revealing a deep, aching sadness beneath. "Because one day," she said, her voice softening, "for the first time, my child, our child will be old enough to type their father's name into a search engine. And I will not have the first result be a mugshot. I will not have their legacy be defined by your conviction. I am not doing this for you, Raymond. I've accepted that the man I married is gone. I am doing this for my baby." Her hand went to her belly, a protective maternal gesture that was both beautiful and heartbreaking. "I am giving our child the gift of a father who is a failure, who is a memory, but who is not a felon. I am giving you this chance so that you do not cast a permanent shadow on an innocent life. What you do with that gift, that is entirely on you." The truth of her words dismantled the last of his defenses. All his ambition, his hunger for status, his desperate need to be seen as powerful, it was all so hollow, so pathetic, compared to the fierce, selfless love she had for their unborn child. He wasn't being punished by a corporate rival. He was being saved by a mother. A tear escaped his eye, then another rolling hot down his cheek. It wasn't the performative sorrow of a man who'd been caught. It was the genuine, soul-crushing grief of a man finally seeing the full scope of what he had destroyed. "I'm sorry, Kate." He choked out the words raw and broken. "Not for my job. Not for my reputation. I am so sorry for that night. For looking at you and not seeing you. I was a coward. I was a monster. I broke your heart, and I know I will spend the rest of my life regretting it." She gave a slow, final nod. It was not forgiveness. It was not absolution. It was an acknowledgement, an ending. "I know." He reached for the pen, his hand shaking so badly he could barely grip it. He looked at the resignation letter. It was the death certificate for Raymond Campbell, the man who had everything and valued nothing. But she was right. It was also a birth certificate, a chance to become someone else, someone better. A chance, however slim, to one day be a man that his child would not have to be ashamed of. He signed his name. He slid the paper across the table, a final, unconditional surrender. "Thank you," he whispered. Kate took the letter, her expression unreadable. She placed it back in the folder and stood, her movements fluid and graceful. "Goodbye, Raymond." She turned and walked away, not looking back. He watched her go, a queen leaving a conquered territory, a mother returning to the future she was building. He was left alone in the silent room, with nothing but the ruins of his life, and the first terrifying ray of light in a long, dark road to redemption. In the end, Raymond Campbell didn't lose his career because of a bad investment. He lost it because he made the worst investment of all. He traded a lifetime of love and family for a moment of acceptance from people who didn't matter. Kate's story is a powerful reminder that true strength isn't about the image you project. It's about the integrity you hold when no one is watching. It's about knowing your own worth, even when those closest to you refuse to see it. She didn't just take back a company. She took back her life, her name, and her future, proving that the most formidable power in the world is a person who has nothing left to lose and everything to build. What did you think of Kate's ultimate power move? Do you believe Raymond deserved the second chance she gave him? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure you subscribe to our channel for more real-life drama that will leave you thinking. Thank you for watching.